What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Saturday Standouts. Ethan's second show here with me tonight as our new co-host. Excited to have him on. Just a little rundown of what we're going to be getting in tonight with you guys is we're going to be going over a little bit of what's happening with the name, image, and likeness bill that's being passed around. That's been passed in a lot of states already when it comes to collegiate players being able to market themselves and make money for themselves while they're in college and get paid ultimately. And then Ethan's going to throw us a little bit of a curveball, a little bit of fun, just, kind of have fun with it a little bit at the end here as well. I'm not going to give it away quite yet. I want Ethan to, kind of blast in, see what you guys think, maybe halfway through the show or towards the end. So you guys keep an eye out for that. While you're here, be able to check out the bottom ticker down there where it has all of our sponsors for the Unwrapped Sports Network, rxhemp.com. It's all natural CBD pain relief cream. You get 10% off with every purchase when you use code I think it's it's rxhemp-USN or something like that. You'll see it there on the ticker. Also, head over to mybookie.ag. It's our gambling website that we are partnered with, and use code USM100 for double your first deposit, guys. There's all kinds of stuff going on right now. Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals in basketball. Baseball just passed, I think, the third part of their season, so they're getting into it as well. And then, after that, college baseball is still going on too. And then, we'll be getting into future season, looking at future bets for the college football season, as well as the NFL season. And then, of course, the Olympics. That'll be something to, really express and, get into if you're a gambling person like myself. And then, that those are our two big ones that we're going to start off here with. And later in the show, we'll get into our Patreon and our Unwrapped Sports Network shop as well. Show you guys a few of the memorabilia items that we have going on, or some of the apparel and, merchandise that you can buy for your favorite Unwrapped Sports Network shows. Much like I'm drinking right now, guys, an Unwrapped Sports coffee mug. You can get something very similar to this on our website that I'll be able to show you later. But without further ado, go ahead, Ethan, tell the people how you're doing, anything new going on in life. How are you doing, man?
I'm great. I recorded with Creating Madness earlier. Go check that out with Derek Fountain. He is a Mississippi State forward. Episode should be up probably around 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern tonight. And obviously Saturday Night Standouts. And then I believe a week from tomorrow, actually, is episode 100 of NFL Deep Dive. So we're going to try and do something big for that. I'll talk with Perry about that as soon as he's off of work.
Yeah, if you guys haven't noticed, our guy Ethan here is an absolute grinder when it comes to the network and all the content that he's able to produce. It's amazing. I'm so glad that he's here with me, taking over for Sam. I know you guys can see the graphic, the logo in the background says Saturday Standouts with Caleb and Sam. We're going to be working on getting that changed, get Ethan's name in there or kind of just rework it somehow, some way to show what's going on. But without further ado, guys, we're going to go ahead and jump into, what's actually happening in the college sphere right now. And what we're going to be talking about here is name, image, and likeness. So that has been something that has been, very prevalent amongst all college football fans, college football analysts, college football people who are within the building of the NCAA as well. It's been a huge topic of conversation here as of late, and there's a lot going on with it. But before we dig deeper into this and we kind of break down a timeline for you guys, I want to get your initial thoughts, Ethan, on what you think this is going to do for college athletes. And do you think it's going to hurt college football or make it better in a way?
I think it 100% makes it better. There are going to be those people that take advantage of it for sure. There are going to be those scandals. That's the same with every single little thing. But what can you do about it? There's always going to be scandals. There's always going to be people paying. That's going to be a thing in college sports, no matter what. In reality, it's a great thing. And I believe one of the Supreme Court justices said it best. If this happened in any other industry in America, it's slavery. So there you go. They're finally righting a wrong.
Yeah, and the NCAA has been kind of dogged on this for a while now about numerous amounts of decisions that they've decided to go and do. This being perhaps one of the biggest one. One of our former, Unwrapped Sports colleagues here, Alex, jumping in saying Christian has requested. I let y'all know he won a fantasy championship this year or this last year. Christian has been on Twitter all day just dogging us for, him winning a championship and how crappy our teams are and everything. So that's where that's coming in. But so this has been something that's been, heavily on the minds of a lot of people. And I'm just going to go ahead and read off of, an article that I'm getting off of ESPN right now for you guys. Go through a little bit of timeline and how we got here up to this point. On September 30th in 2019, California passes a legislation by their Senator Nancy Skinner that starting in 2023, they were going to prohibit schools from punishing athletes who accept endorsement money while in college. That kind of got the ball rolling here in the talks for name, image, likeness talks when it comes to the NCAA. In October of that same year in 2019, Board of Governors agrees unanimously that it is time to modernize its name, image, and likeness rules. Board directs all 3 NCAA divisions to make rules by January of 2021, which is obviously already passed. In April of last year, 2020, there was a group appointed by the NCAA. And they laid out suggestions for how Division I should change its rules, including details about the opportunities restrictions for future athlete deals. They proposed these changes in November of 2020, which is obviously much later than April. June 12th, Florida passes a state law saying that they could pay players of July 1st, 2021. So this year, July 22nd, last year, Mark Emmert, the NCAA president, who is not a huge, people aren't a huge fan of him. People don't like Mark Emmert, don't like how he runs things. Pretty much looking like NCAA is going into the ground up at this point that we're at now, just because of everything that has unfolded from this. He repeats a request for congressional help in creating a federal name, image, likeness law while appearing at a Senate hearing in Washington, D.C. August of last year, a group of Pac-12 football players threatens to boycott the season while sharing a list of demands that included giving players a share of athletic department revenue. Similar group of national stars formed a week later and stated its intent to form a college football players association in the future, much like we see with the NBA and WNBA and NFL. There's all these players associations. So with this happening in college, it's inevitable at this point that there is going to be name, image, likeness. Players are going to get paid for, marketing themselves, branding themselves, putting themselves out there, advertising for other companies, things of that nature. That's inevitable at this point. So we're starting to see you're going to have a coalition of some sort to be able to control that. September of 2020, Representatives Anthony Gonzalez, Republican out of Ohio, and Emmanuel Cleaver, the Democrat out of Missouri, introduced a federal bill that would allow for NIL deals with some restrictions in hopes of keeping endorsements from disrupting the recruiting process, because that's obviously a concern. Certain schools can pay more money to get you on their campus. That's obvious. You look at the Alabamas of the world, Clemson's of the world. They can throw money on top of money on top of money at these kids, and that's an obvious recruiting win. So there is, kind of the balance here from, Ohio and Missouri teams like, well, we might not be able to do that. So, there's a little bit of a disruption there. December of last year, Republican out of Mississippi, Senator Roger Wicker introduced federal legislation that would allow some NIL deals and also create an antitrust exemption that would protect the NCAA from some types of future lawsuits. And then December of last year, Supreme Court agreed to hear the NCAA's appeal of federal judges' ruling in the Alston versus NCAA antitrust lawsuit. While not directly related to the NIL rules, the Supreme Court's decision in this case could impact how much control the NCAA has in defining amateurism in the future. December of last year as well, New Jersey and Connecticut introduced legislation calling for a wide-reaching overhaul of NCAA rules as a whole. Now we're into 2021 here in January. This is where things really start to heat up as we're in the off season of football. Obviously that's when all this is really going to start happening. The NCAA Division I Council decides to indefinitely delay its vote on name, image, and likeness rules, citing concerns prompted by a letter from the Department of Justice related to the possible antitrust implications of changing its rules. Emmert, the NCAA president, of course, said he was frustrated and disappointed by the delay, because this is actually something that he's trying to push now, because his name has been slandered over and over again for not doing this. Now he's trying to fix it. March of 13, Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the Alston versus NCAA antitrust. April, so we're coming up on current times here. NCAA President Mark Emmert met with the 3 men's basketball players trying to raise awareness using the hashtag #NotNCAA property. We all saw that unfold in, the NCAA tournament and all of that. So if you paid attention to the NCAA tournament when it came to basketball, you're able to see that there were big name players out there who, stood out and, took a stake for what they deserve. And that's what we're hearing here in April, right after the March Madness was over. So the players asked the NCAA to adopt a temporary blanket waiver that would allow all athletes to make money from endorsement deals next school year while more permanent decisions take shape. Then in June, leading right up to where we are now, just about 6 conference heads, including ACC, SEC, Pac-12 leaders, propose a new plan that would make individual schools responsible for creating their own NIL policies. So you've kind of seen that with Florida State coming out and being one of the first teams or schools to kind of promote this, what they're going to do, already hiring a marketing firm to be able to help with the transition and help, the players be able to do what they're supposed to do to get to the point that they want to be at. So that's kind of what's going on leading up till now. And then as of most recently, we have seen things, take another step ahead. And the latest in what's going on, the likelihood that a federal law making one clear set of rules for name, image, and likeness will come to fruition in the near future seemed to shrink considerably in June as members of Congress have settled into a partisan divide about the scope of needed reform. Obviously, this is political when it comes to the NCAA, much like it is, in regular life. Bipartisan disagreements, that's going to be a problem. And that honestly just decreases the chances of something happening because there's not an agreement on it. Senate committee held its 6th hearing on college sport on June 17th, 2-hour discussion. Safe to assume that no bill would be put to vote before state name, image, and likeness are scheduled to go into effect at the start of July. So these states that have already agreed to pay their players or allow their schools to, or allow the players at these schools in these particular states go out and find work and make money off of their name, image, and likeness. Those certain states, those players can do it. So that creates kind of a rift there when it comes to recruiting as well. Since there's no set singular guideline at this moment for it to happen, but those states that did pass those bills are allowing, and the NCAA is allowing them to make money off of their name. And then it goes on and on. There's talk about proposed bills that was just passed as well when it came to academics for these athletes as well. You meet certain criteria, then it makes it easier for you to be on this level. But just going off of that, all right, what are we thinking at this point? Do we see eventually there being one set standard of rules or policies or laws from the NCAA granting all teams name, image, likeness, or do we not? And if you don't, or if you do, just kind of expand on that and why, Ethan.
I think that eventually, everyone's allowed to make money, name, image, and likeness. You're allowed to create your brand, use your brand. You're allowed to make the deals with companies where they pay you for events, as long as it doesn't cross with what the NCAA has you doing. I think at some point, though, if you end up doing anything using your school's colors, school's going to take a blank percentage of that, and they're going to say, well, guess what? You're using your name and our name are alike and combined. So we get X percent. Probably my guess is going to be they're going to BS it all the way up to eventually 50%. Anything using that, unless they just say sign
Which
ball.
I think we have seen this. Was it Georgia that might have passed their law, and it said that a portion of whatever the athlete makes goes back into the athletic department.
Right. I think that's stupid. If someone makes, all right, here's $1 million shoe deal. You're going to appear in this commercial. You're going to come to this event. School doesn't deserve any of that. I'm sorry. If they don't say rep, if it's like blank player from blank high school, like the fact that college basketball players are leaving for an overtime league and going overseas, they want money. As long as they can get to that second contract in the big leagues and they can actually make it and they have that skill, they're good. They just need to make it to that second contract. They're making bank. Even on that first contract, $1 million ain't nothing to laugh at. If you're able to make $1 million in 1 year, you invest that wisely, you never need to work again.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. I do understand where they're kind of coming from when you're talking about, and when you brought it up is, if you're using the school's logo, the school's colors or whatever, I can understand that. Maybe a little bit of them taking a portion of those proceeds. I mean, you look at the NFL, And, when it comes to jersey sales, like you like, for instance, Dalvin Cook in Minnesota, like you buy a Dalvin Cook jerseys, not all that money goes to Fanatics. The NFL teams are obviously paid a portion of those proceeds because it's using their logo, their copyright, whatever, and whatever else. But the player sees none of that money. The player will never see any of that money from a sale of one of their jerseys. So, I mean, that's kind of robbery there as well. But, when you look at it from this standpoint, it makes sense ultimately. Like if you're going to be profiting, especially at a rate, like say you're like Devontae Smith last year, right? And you go and do a commercial for the local Toyota dealership, and they're going to pay you, 500 grand just to do this one commercial, because they're going to think, oh, we're going to sell all these vehicles, we're going to make over that amount of money and, double our return or whatever. Right. And they say, Devontae Smith, here's 500 grand. We need you here on this day. Shoot this commercial. Need you in your national championship, Alabama jersey, this, that, and the other. He's going to show up. And that's just one thing, half a mil, for him to be able to go do.
Right.
So, of course, that's going to accumulate the more and more stuff you do. But I think the biggest aspect of this that is going to come out of it is it going to work? I don't know. There are going to be players out there that can, use it to their advantage and take advantage of that situation. Right. Most likely it's going to be those players who are the big names. I mean, you go back in time and look at some of the guys who could have been the most profitable players in college football, particularly. You look at guys like Johnny Manziel, Vince Young.
Manziel made a hell of a lot of money, whether he's going to admit it or not.
Right. Whether it was legal or not, he still was. But you get what I'm saying, right? If it was legal, if that man would have made so much money.
If it was legal, he'd have his own strip club like Floyd Mayweather does.
Exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see what occurs once this all does passes. One of the things that I'm biggest on and happy about is with this happening is that these players that don't necessarily get all the playing time and they've got all these other things that they do on the side. I mean, we've seen guys who are artists who paint, draw, guys who are really good at music, who play instruments extremely well, and they're not even allowed to promote their work that they do on their own Instagram pages because it's against the NCAA rules because you're promoting yourself and you're not allowed to do that. So then it's automatically taken down and then they reach out and they're like, you can't do this. So I think that's the biggest help here is for those people, those players to be able to get their names out there doing what they love to do that will create other opportunities for them if that sport, and particularly football, what we're talking about now, doesn't work out for them.
You know what they can also do? They can go do a football camp. If you get like freshman who was a 3-star can go like made it out of like a crap neighborhood and like crappy little Arkansas, crappy part of Chicago, crappy whatever. They can just go back to their hometown, set up a football camp, charge $20. They're able to make money because blank player name, whatever.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that, and that's just another way, like it's another way. There's so many different avenues that you can take. But going from there, we've explained our opinions on the nature of everything. What do you think this will ultimately do for the NCAA as a whole organization? Do you think that this could be a crumbling point because of all of the things that you have gotten wrong? Or do you think that this might be able to hold them in place?
I think this could either boost them or crumble them. Because if there ends up being 5 scandals, like that first year, makes X player for basketball $10 million plus the shoe deal. Duke helps, new coach at Duke helps them with the shoe deal. Alabama gets the sponsorships to pay the players to go to Alabama. If they end up having these types of scandals, it crumbles the NCAA and makes them say, see, this is what happens when this happens. Or it could be a lot of players getting the boost they need economically, being able to focus on, instead of working a part of a 9-to-5 job, they can focus on school, get their degree, play the sport they love, and make a little extra money and send to their family. Like, there's so many good and bad outcomes that could happen from this. Like,
yeah, I think it's either...
It's hit or miss.
Right?
That's what the NCAA is afraid of.
Yep, that's exactly how I was going to put it. It's hit or miss. You know, you if you're the NCAA, this is either a hit or you're going to drown. You know, like this is your last chance before it becomes each conference and their commissioner of each conference takes over for their individual conference. And then who knows what happens with college football? You know, like then who knows what direction college football goes into? Because I do think there needs to be a governing head to the snake as a whole. But does that governing head need to be, you know, just one sole enterprise like the NCAA? Not necessarily. I mean, you look at professional leagues, and that looks like where we're heading in college sports as a whole. Amateurism is gone at this point, you know, like where we're headed. So
for a while,
you're gonna have to create all kinds of different, like a players association. You're gonna have an executive organization. You're gonna have to have all kinds of different, you know, groups of things going on to be able to work together. So I think if the NCAA, I think as a whole, that's probably what's most likely going to happen for this to be successful. And if it doesn't happen, then that'll create a crumbling effect, and it just is not going to work, and the NCAA will go down in its own fire. You there, Ethan? Did we lose you?
Like, they're going to make it work. Like, because watch what happens. Overtime creates a football league next because the basketball league goes so successful. If they have even more players join that, it works out. They can make a football league. All they need is 4 teams of top players, and you can switch the team around every X amount. That's enough. I think if you have the top prospects playing against each other head-to-head for 4 years, 3 years, that should be enough to get them to the NFL. So potentially I could see overtime or like a Nike, Adidas, like funding these types of making a miniature league for all these high schoolers and developmental for the NFL.
Right, and they already kind of do that. I mean, you see the Nike Elite 11 camps, the Under Armour All-American Games, you know, all this goes on. And these are large organizations that are able to put these things on to be able to showcase these athletes. So at some point, if the NCAA just doesn't do this the right way, you can see these large organizations come in and take over because they've already got a foot in the door ultimately.
Yeah.
And that'll lead us to, you know, what comes next. There's a whole lot that needs to be hashed out. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, like we talked about with the college football playoff last week, on how there's a lot of moving parts that need to be discussed. Same thing here in May or June. So, you know, right here where we're at, Supreme Court heard oral arguments. And let's see where we're at now. July 1st, state laws are scheduled to begin to go into effect. So the states who put into effect those laws allowing players to, you know, be compensated for what they do, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, New Mexico, Texas, are going to be able to start accepting endorsement deals as of July 1st coming up here very soon. NCAA might file a lawsuit against the states before. So keep an eye out for that, because that is something that is coming up here very soon. I mean, we've got a week left in June, and that's it before we transfer over to July. So keep an eye out for that, and ask a judge. And they're going to be asking a judge for an injunction, and that, if granted, could postpone the law's enforcement when it comes to these states in particular. Looking at where we're at now, June 22nd, June 23rd, so yesterday and today, NCAA's Division I Council is scheduled to meet to discuss multiple options for changing the association's rules that govern NIL activity. So these are the big conversations that are happening at this moment during these last 2 days, today and yesterday, that are going to be really a pavement for moving forward with the NIL bill. And then on June 28th, 5 days from now, the Division I Council has reserved another day to meet and are most likely to reach a decision on if and how to change the NCAA's rules at the outset of the NIL era. So this is going to happen. It's going to happen. NCAA is trying to get it right. They're making moves to be able to get it right. Let's hope they do get it right, because if not, states are going to start taking their own, you know, advantage of this situation to be able to put and bring the best talent to their particular things. That's why you see on July 1st, they might try and enact a certain, you know, lawsuit against this to be able to stop it, or, you know, put it on hold for a little bit longer so that the NCAA has time to come up with one whole group of set rules and policies for the NIL moving forward in compensation of college student athletes. What are your thoughts on that, Ethan? And where do you think we are headed? Do you think that
I think that
it does get postponed, or do you think that
I think it gets postponed for 2 weeks, and then the government's going to say, "Listen, we're going to step in because we've had enough of your bullshit. So every single state's allowed to have it. No more one state, no more any of that crap." But I have a question for you, Caleb. What happens if all the 5 stars and all these players just go sign a deal with Nike for millions of dollars? Is the NCAA going to say, all right, we're not going to let the top 30 players of the class of 2021 play because they took millions of dollars? What are they going to do if all these players are making money and flaunting it and saying, hey, we made this, what are you going to do? You're not going to kick them out. They're your future.
Well, that's true.
If all the players band together, I see why they don't just say screw the NCAA at this point. Like, come on.
Yeah, but I think that's where the July 1st deadline comes in, because if the NCAA hasn't set forth the whole thing by then, or hasn't come to a conclusion quite yet on it. I mean, it's been in talk for years now. So they should be almost there at that point. So I think the July 1st deadline really is what prohibits that from happening, because at that point, kids are on campus. Kids are going to start doing this July 1st. That's when these states have enacted their laws or bills or whatever you want to call it for these students to make money off of themselves, off their name, image, and likeness.
If I'm Under Armour, I'm sending out my marketing executives, DMing each of these kids, call me at 12:01 a.m. and I have a contract for you to sign virtually. You're going to make millions. If I'm Under Armour,
I mean, it's as simple as emailing a PDF and you sign it like you're signing for a job. Like that's as simple as this whole process can be. And if this next week is going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds. I mean, really, ultimately, the time between June 28th and July 1st, that 3-day window is going to be absolutely huge for the NCAA to make moves that they need to make to either try and delay it if that's what they want to do because they're not ready, or just say, you know what, F it, let those particular states do it while we try and figure it out, and whatever comes out of that, so be it. I don't think it's necessarily a huge deal for the 2021 class, but if this thing goes any longer than a whole nother year into the next recruiting process for 2022 kids, then that'll become a huge issue. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue for 2021 because I don't think a lot of these kids were thinking about that. They don't necessarily know the timeline of the events that are going on. I mean, you think about it, they're high school kids. How much did we pay attention to shit when we're that age? There's some kids that obviously do, but I mean, majority of us don't really give a fuck, excuse my language, but about shit like that's going on until it's obvious that it's going to happen and we can get paid. Right. So, I mean, for them, they probably don't even know all this is. I mean, I'm sure some pay attention, but majority, I would guess not, just based off of my knowledge of how I was when I was that age. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think it necessarily affects this year. Everybody already kind of had their minds made up of where they were going to go. They've already signed, that letter of intent, excuse me, to play for these teams. So unless, a transfer, the transfer portal creates a whole nother sort of issue. So I can't even imagine what the NCAA is trying to do and figure out, because there's so many things that could go wrong or could give, a certain team advantage over others because of this. So the NCAA is really on a time crunch here to be able to do it. I don't think it's going to affect the 2021 class all that much, but if this thing goes any longer than say 6 months to a year, then you can start to see the fallout from that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And what are your thoughts? Do you see it, to your own question, do you see that happening? You see it affecting the 2021 class? Or I just feel as confused as anybody else on this whole situation.
If I'm the players that want to make a stand, if I'm all the seniors from this past basketball season, this past whatever, I sit the tournament. I say, you didn't have it last year, you're not having it this year. Screw you, NCAA. Have fun making money with half of our players sitting out. If I'm the player, you cost them that much money. You give them the middle finger. Bye-bye. We're out. We're going to go play professional basketball overseas. We're going to go use our degrees that we had to earn and already do X amount of work and play basketball for minimal, get out of here. Like, if I'm the players, as much as it sucks to see as a fan, as much as I would have wanted to scream and rip their throats out of, like, their neck, like, that's what they should have done if they wanted to make a stand. If you wanted that stand,
right? But it's also hard. It's also hard for these student athletes to do that because they are working to make it to the next level, and they don't want to put themselves in jeopardy of going to do that. You miss games, exclusive games, games that are watched by millions of people. People who don't even watch college basketball, for instance, watch March Madness. So, like, you wanna put your name out there, obviously, as much as possible.
That's why it's such a big stand, because you're costing the NCAA that much money, and all the like.
It is, but also when you think about it from that perspective, all these scouts, all these NBA scouts, NFL scouts, whatever you want to call it, they want to see you perform on the biggest stage possible, right? They don't want to see you play against, let me use, for instance, Florida State playing a D3 basketball team. Like, they don't care that you put up 32 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists against a D3 school. They want to see you do that up against the best competition. So, like, it's a hard thing for them to be able to decide if that's the right move for them. Obviously, when you look at what the NBA, MLB, was able to do last year with all the social injustices and everything like that, they are able to do that because they've already solidified themselves in the job that they have and what they do. So they're able to do that. They have associations to help them along the way. They're still going to get paid. So, like, even if they sit out a game, I'm still getting paid. I signed this contract. I know the ins and outs. I've got lawyers, attorneys that look over this for me and let me know if you're gonna make
it. Sign a contract saying that I'm gonna play every game for you and I'm not allowed to sit out. They don't sign that. They say I'm going to represent the school. If a player wants to just quit on his team, Kentucky had a player that did that. I'm not blaming him for doing it either, but like
and a letter of intent is not the same as a contract. Like there's a difference between those two.
Imagine if every single upperclassman sat out this past year, like that entire tournament, and you had each team playing with 6 people, 7 people because of I forget what the word is because I'm blanking, but you know what I mean. Like unscholarship kids, you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So
like walk-ons or
walk-ons. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. But yeah, what happens with that? Like if they all do that, would you say that could have potentially jolted this that much more forward to the point where they would have had it done by end of May? Like it would have sucked for the players. It would have sucked for the fans. But even more so, NCAA, I promise you, loses millions. Close to billion.
Yeah. I mean, they absolutely do. I mean, we saw it with COVID when they had to cancel the tournament. Like that March Madness tournament ultimately is the biggest money maker for the NCAA. We all know it. TV revenue is huge. Sales from tickets, sales from concessions, sales from memorabilia, out the roof when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And that's where the NCAA makes a large portion of their money. So it would definitely hurt them 10 times more than it would probably hurt yourself. But at the same time, it's hard to do that when you're a kid trying to make a name for yourself. That's the hardest part and aspect for me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll leave name, image, and likeness at that, and we're gonna jump into Ethan's proposed idea and topic of the night. So I'm gonna let you take it away, there, brother.
All right. So if you're a 5-star player from nowhere, Utah, are you gonna go to BYU or Utah, or are you gonna go to USC, Oregon, Alabama, the major school, instead of your homegrown talent that's been recruiting you since day one in freshman year? You're going to go to Alabama because Nick Saban. So I'm proposing the idea. What if you could only play for the school that you lived the majority of your life in that state? Obviously, you could, I think that evens out the entire college football landscape, personally. Right there.
So you're talking strictly in-state recruiting only. You can only go
in-state recruiting only. That's obviously not for JUCO. JUCO, go wherever and then transfer there. but you're still using up 2 years of your eligibility. So I'm sorry, there's no 4-star going to JUCO just to be at that. That like, if you're international, go wherever you want. I'm not going to say go play college football in Canada or Mexico or Europe. That's obviously no. That's fine. But like if you're born in Texas, you go play for one of the Texas schools. But here's the question: if you're a 5-star, are you going to Texas A&M? These schools are going to split up, and Baylor, they have Texas Tech, they have a lot of Power 5 schools right there. Not even going into the group of 5, so the top talent isn't limited to one school. Only state that I see a problem is Georgia, and they still have Georgia Tech. If Georgia Tech's able to build something there, them and Georgia are having the best recruiting battles ever.
Yeah,
there's there's a lot of flaws with the system, but like if you look at it, what states are hard? Like Wisconsin, all right. How much high school talent comes out of Wisconsin? Not a whole lot. Wisconsin has to rely on their homegrown talent. Minnesota relies on homegrown. Iowa State, they're going to rely on those country boys up there.
Which they do already. Which
they already do. Michigan State battles, they're going to actually be able to keep those guys in state. Ohio, they're going to get their top guys for sure. But like if you're these 3-stars, are you really going to go to where you're not the feature guy? Or are you going to go to Akron, Kent State? Are you going to go to like those smaller schools just to be the guy on that group of 5 team? I don't know. What's your opinion, Caleb?
Yeah, Connie coming in here and, just dogging me right off the bat. Appreciate it, Connie. Glad you can finally watch me on my show. Let me change the banner here real quick. Let people know what we're talking about. Only in-state recruiting is what we're talking about, guys. Interesting stuff. Ethan brought it to my attention. I know there has been previous articles and stuff written about it. I know Ethan's actually written one himself. I think he relayed the message to me that it was his first article that he has actually ever written. Excuse me. So it's a very interesting topic. I'm very interested with this because I don't know if it would change or even out the landscape of college football as a whole. It's an interesting thing because there's definitely some states that would, benefit from this. And there's obviously some states that might not. You brought up Georgia and Georgia Tech and Georgia obviously being a huge benefactor from that. But looking at, what Georgia Tech has been able to do and build momentum here in these last couple of seasons with their new head coach, moving over from the triple option into a, more modern type of play calling, more type of, modern play system, if you will, they can start to make some noise there too. And we had talked about this prior to the show. Georgia, specifically South Georgia, is a hotbed for recruits. I mean, you look at guys always there coming out of there. It's very small towns, and these guys will go to these schools. And if it's just strictly limited to, Georgia Tech are your main ones. There's obviously, Georgia Southern, all these other Georgia State that are there. Those schools are definitely going to prosper from it. These 3-stars that are there aren't going to be able to go anywhere else. And so Georgia Southern, Georgia State are going to be getting these 3-stars that they probably had no business getting in the first place. So, and those are 3-stars. Who knows about how many 4-stars or whatever else there are? That recruiting landscape will change greatly. Matt coming in says straight respect for Connie. Caleb always says great shows. I appreciate the love, Matt. Thank you, brother.
Even going into Alabama, obviously you have Alabama, the big school, right? At the exact
in Auburn.
Then you have Auburn. Auburn always has been dogging it. The Alabama, they're always on their heels. They've beaten Alabama numerous times in the past decade. So I see no reason why Auburn doesn't steal a couple 5-stars out of Alabama's back pocket. I see no obviously transfer portal, you're able to go wherever you want, but like whatever.
Right. And so if we're talking about hotbeds here, all right, let's go back to that conversation about hotbeds. So the hotbeds for recruiting
Texas,
in general
Florida,
now.
Georgia.
Right. Texas, Florida, Georgia, and California, maybe. You could throw California in there.
Right. But here's the thing. Florida. I'm a 5-star at Florida. Let's assume UCF gets moved up to a Power 5 conference in 5 years because they will probably.
Which, they are only up and coming at this point, so that we can just go ahead and lump them into, I guess you could say the big 4 of Florida when it comes to Miami, Florida State, and UCF now.
Right. So you're a big-time prospect. You have multiple schools to choose from. You're not not one school is going to dominate. Texas, they have 5 Power 5 teams. If you're going to Cali, you have Cal, Stanford, USC, UCLA. Like these bigger hotbeds, they're able to like be spread out enough where I think it's fair enough. Illinois got.
Oh,
Illinois.
I think it probably even makes it more fair when it
Exactly.
comes to because those states.
At that point,
There's other schools that pull from South Florida, Miami area specifically. Alabama's been doing it for years. Clemson's now doing it. So those teams aren't going to be getting those players like they used to or are now. So that makes it very interesting, and also it limits them to which school do I want to go to. You can see schools like specifically speaking on Florida because that's where I am and that's my general knowledge of football as a whole that I'd have the most about. You look at the FIUs, the FAUs, the USFs, you could even look at, HBCUs, like FAMU, start to get some of these kids that it's just going to spread the wealth around. I think it's an amazing idea to think about. Do I necessarily think it's achievable? I don't know.
Not at all.
Fun.
It's just a fun idea to play around with.
Yeah, it would be extremely fun.
If you look at that, then I'm gonna be honest. Right now, Northwestern beats Illinois in football, like recruit wise. But at the same time, we still have a lot of 4 stars, maybe a 5-star every couple of years. Illinois still gets 1 out of every 4 of them at least. Like that's not good, but listen. If the talent's split up between schools, I think that makes the landscape so much better, so much different every year. And in Louisiana, right as of this past couple of years, after Burrow, University of Louisiana Lafayette is Louisiana's football school. I think that in reality, they will top LSU in the 2020 decade. So I think those 2 schools are fighting for Louisiana recruits. Mississippi, just going into Power 5, Ole Miss, Mississippi State are battling it out for the Mississippi recruits. Arkansas State. Like, first off, Arkansas doesn't have a lot of ballers for football, so that's fine for being 100% honest. And
right. Anyway. So from there, and you're talking about, excuse me, you said Arkansas doesn't have a lot of ballers. I mean, they have one or like a few every once in a while that are ranked very high. Looking at that, and you mentioning that brought into my head, what are the states or areas in particular that you could see, benefiting from this, whether that's Power 5 schools or non-Power 5 schools, and areas or states that will, be decimated by a rule enacted as such?
I really think that all the smaller...
Let's go, Skura, lightning up, baby. Going for back-to-back Stanley Cups. Let's go.
I think that group of 5 teams dominate because, all right, we have 2 Power 5s, and then we have us in blank state. Like, I'm not going to name the state off the top of my head because I'm blanking on it. But if you go into, what is it? Alabama, you got Troy, Auburn, Southern Alabama. I'm not going to go into the FCS ones because that's going to make me go deep into my head, and I don't like using my head too much. So, Troy and Southern Alabama. If you're the top 4 quarterbacks in the state, number 1 goes to Alabama or Auburn. Number 2 goes to the other one of those. Number 3 and 4, they're still decent quarterbacks. Are you really going to go back up these guys until your senior year, potentially not even making it that far because of, if they start off,
especially if you're in the same recruiting class.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Unless you redshirt,
and even then, next year's number 1 quarterback might go there too. So at that same point, the number 3 quarterback goes to Southern Alabama. Number 4 goes to Troy. These teams slowly rise up because they're developing these actually good players that just want to be that focus point of the offense or defense. Like if I'm the number 2 running back in the state and I see that they already got the number 1 last year, am I going to Auburn? Hell no. I'm going to one of these schools. As long as they have a good enough coaching staff and the system for you, you go there.
Yeah, that's amazing that could happen because you build, the level of opportunity and level of play at a school that is not known for that. That's amazing. That's awesome. But looking at, let's say, geez, man, I don't even know which state to go to. We'll go back to Missouri or Arkansas. These teams that are here in the South or Midwest-ish, I think that might hurt them the most.
Really?
I don't know particularly, but I would assume so. Or I mean, you look at the Northeast, for instance. Northeast football is not the level of play that South football is or West Coast football is. And, there's levels to each playing, from each region or division or wherever you want to go. So like California is not quite, the South. The Northeast is not quite California. And, there's obvious regions where there are hotbeds of players that are better for some reason based off of certain circumstances. So it's confusing to me because I don't know if teams like a Missouri or in Arkansas. I mean, you have Arkansas State in Arkansas as well. Right. You don't have anything much else in that. Missouri, I don't even know if there's a Missouri State. I know there's a Missouri. Like, that's the only football team. So it might work well, but also at the same time, when going over and looking up at the Northeast, what are you stuck with if you're a Rutgers, a Syracuse?
Well, here's the thing. New Jersey has a lot of good high school football players. New York still, I'll go into state rankings in New York right now. Give me one moment. Let's go see this. New York football. They had 2 4-stars, and they had a total of 17 people ranked inside the top 150. There's still very many. If you go into the top 1,000, there's enough players in New York that will be able to get signed to all the New York schools. If you Buffalo's on the up and coming. If you go into pretty much any type of if you want to go into Massachusetts, UMass, Boston College, they have enough talent in these states. And in reality, part of it might be you have to start allowing more so movement every 5 to 10 years between FCS and FBS, with the top FCS, almost like this European soccer. Top FCS teams move up, lowest FBS move down. And you just have
I would say what intrigues me the most about this is what happens if this were to be a thing or a case at some point. What do you see happening when it comes to conferences, when it comes to playoff championships, things of that nature? Because obviously if you pit say in Alabama or a Florida State or a Florida or a Georgia against a I don't even know, like a Michigan or like a Missouri or an Arkansas or a Nebraska, what happens then? You have to change a whole lot, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily. I mean, if Nebraska is coaching, they'll to develop.
Because when it comes to bowl season, there's a lot of crossover, right? So there's a lot of things happening.
And that you're still scheduling non-conference games. It's honestly going to just be which state is the best, and I feel like that's going to create a whole bunch of new rivalries in conference.
So, at that point, would you think it would be better to obviously you still have your non-conference games, but would you realign conferences by region?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that you realign conferences every we'll say every 8 years, every 2 full recruiting cycles of 2 incoming classes of freshmen to be out of there. Just realign.
That's interesting. So you could kind of group Florida, Georgia, Bama, Louisiana, Mississippi,
and probably what
Carolinas, Tennessee.
Yeah, and then you just put
and maybe Texas.
Yeah, the top school from each of those is there's so many big ones, and then you keep going by second, third, and then you just keep grouping and bringing some FCS up and some FBS down. If FIU goes 2-7 and then FAMU goes 12-0 and wins the FCS championship. You bring them up, you bring FIU down.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
Like I would
That's
say,
a very
I'd love to try it out on NCAA 14, but that's gonna be a pain in my ass unless I take Texas.
Well, we got a whole new one coming. I'm so excited for that, by the way. That's gonna be exciting.
Oh my god! I'm telling you right now, if EA screws it up, I promise you, EA's headquarters will be on fire.
EA needs to get away from the game, anyway.
EA needs to get the hell out of there.
Oh yeah, baby. This has been a very interesting topic. There's so many different ways you can go with it. Realigning conferences. It's just the up and down of what can happen when it comes to in-state recruiting. That could change the whole landscape of college football. Maybe one day we will find out. That'll be interesting. But anything else you want to talk about before we go ahead and log off here, Ethan?
Yes, I just want to go right into kind of Utah, just because they do have 3 schools: Utah State, Utah, okay, BYU. So, who do you think actually does the best? Because they have 35 top 250 players.
So they have what? Utah, BYU, and Utah State?
Yep. The top ones, obviously, I'm not sure where they go, because Utah State had Jordan Love, BYU just had Zach Wilson, and Utah is in the Pac-12. So assuming that the conferences are like how they are right now, where do you go? If you're the number 1 quarterback in Utah, are you going to the Power 5? Or are you going to one of the 2 that just developed a quarterback to get taken in the first round of the NFL?
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind here is the restrictions that BYU has on not only their players but their students as a whole. That can prohibit potential top prospects from wanting to go there because they don't want to follow those rules. And they'll be kicked out. So I would think Utah and Utah State would probably be the most beneficiary teams in that state. But I also look at it from who's been the most successful out of there recently. Utah, BYU. Utah State, obviously, with Jordan Love, that's a thing, right? But the 2 most successful teams out of there have been BYU and Utah. So I would say probably Utah and Utah State, just based off of what I mentioned earlier. But that's a very interesting thing.
Right. I'd love for this to be able to happen. If I ever become commissioner of the NCAA, I will be more hated for this because people will hate the fact that they aren't able to. I think another point that this brings up: who can develop the most natural talent, coach-wise? Can Nick Saban really do it? He obviously could, but you know what I mean? Can blank coach do it without taking the?
Well, there's certain coaches out there. So you think of
Jim Harbaugh.
Obviously, the first. Great, no, absolutely not. You think of the Nick Sabans. You think of Jimbo Fishers. You think of guys who are really good at developing talent. Mac Brown, UNC right now, really good at doing and developing players as well. Kirby Smart, you maybe could even throw in there, but there's the obvious answers. There are the obvious choices for that. The real question mark comes into the coaches who aren't well developed or aren't well developed in developing NFL talent. So then that could be a knock on your team as well. So like we were talking about with all these Florida schools, are you really going to go play for Willie Taggart at FAU, who is not known for developing players?
Are you going to go to Texas? Huh? Are you going to go to Texas that gets all the 5 stars and that puts one in the 6th round of the NFL draft?
That's an interesting thing too.
So if I'm the 5-star in that scenario, I go to Texas A&M over them. I start considering Baylor, Tech.
Well, you look at Tom Herman compared to Jimbo Fisher.
Right.
Is there really a question which you go play for?
Exactly. And this would be a very fun scenario to watch play out.
Yeah, it would be absolutely exciting. I think it would be electric for college football as a whole, no matter what team you are. It would be amazing to see happen. It's not feasible in my mind, but it's a great thing to look at.
We haven't even gone into like the high school aspect. Imagine how electrifying high school games are, because you know that these are the kids. Like, coaches aren't going out of state to find someone. They're saying, we're going to our local games. You're knowing that you're being watched from day one in high school.
Could you imagine having, speaking of like just Florida, because that's what I know, like you got Willie Taggart, Dan Mullen, Gus Malzahn, and Mike Norvell all at your football game on a Friday night. Like,
exactly. That would make high school football so much better. That would make that I feel like would increase everything for college football, high school football, just because it emphasizes development and not just getting pure talent to the best schools. And there's no way to BS it. Like, it's whatever state you lived in for the most part of your life. Like, there's not unless you want to throw away 2 years of your eligibility by going to a JUCO, which sure, if you're really wanting to do that to your eligibility, go right ahead. Go do that and transfer to Clemson. Use your 2 years of eligibility. I don't care.
Well, at that point, you could see JUCOs take off. So
exactly,
and that's still a win-win.
Exactly, and then the smaller schools build up and send players to the NFL. I see that could be a potential huge win. NCAA, sign me to your board of directors right now. I'll be 18.
Hire everybody.
Hire me and Caleb.
Yeah, there you go. We got the insights. We got everything laid out. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. This is another great episode of Saturday Standouts. We got into some more serious talk early on when we were talking about name, image, and likeness when it comes to college sports as a whole, specifically college football a little bit, and more basketball once we got into the moneymaker that is the NCAA. And then at the end we had a little bit more fun with it. We were talking about in-state recruiting only, which was something that was brought on by Ethan that I was shocked to even hear about it, because I had never thought about it, just in-state recruiting as a whole. So I was very excited to talk about that because it's a big thing. I am from Florida. I live in Florida, so it's a real big thing here, where Florida is perhaps the most talented group of kids that come out of high school. For the most part, it's been proven over and over again based off statistics and rankings and ratings and all of this that 247 Sports and all those guys do. So that was very exciting to talk about. You guys can follow me at CHS Knoll right there next to my name on Twitter. Ethan, you got any shout outs before we go ahead and log off?
At Ethan_Carboni on Twitter. I post all my new articles, new podcasts on there. So
he's a great follow, guys. Be sure to go follow Ethan. Be sure to follow myself at CHS Knoll. Go follow at Saturday Standouts on Twitter as well. We're going to start posting on there more. We've got to get some podcasts out there as well for you guys. And I know you guys have been watching. Be sure to tune in to those codes down there on the ticker, mybookie.ag. Use code USN100 for double your first deposit. rxhemp.com. Use rxhemp-USN for 10% off every single one of your purchase for all natural CBD relief cream. And then head over to our USN shop. Go to teespring.com, type in teespring.com/stores/unwrapped. Find all your merchandise. Also, go and head over to our Patreon, Unwraps Patreon. It's an amazing thing we got going on. Support the people that you love the most here and love watching, aka us. We've got a $1 tier, a $5 tier, a $10 tier. The $1 tier, you're just pretty much, just supporting us however you can monthly with $1, which is amazing. We thank you guys for that. At the $5 level, you kind of move up here. You get access to our 24/7 Patreon only Discord chat, make discussions, talk sports, discuss daily gambling lines, which is probably the biggest thing that we have going on there. Make yourself some money for only $5 a month, fantasy sports and more there as well. And then at the $10 per month level, you get 20% off of a code to our Unwrapped Teespring shop, which is amazing. And then you also get access to our 24/7 Patreon only Discord chat that I mentioned earlier. At that $10 level, you also get entered into a giveaway for a signed memorabilia item, whether that's a signed helmet, a signed jersey, or what be it, pictures as well, that you can get by just joining that. $10 per month is amazing. I mean, you get tons of, exposure there at the $10 level. You're entered into a raffle to be able to win that signed memorabilia item. It's an amazing thing that we got going on at Unwrapped. But with that being said, that's the last of, our sponsors. And I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight to another edition of Saturday Standouts.